We can start. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name's Grant Vernon from Innovation Academy. Today, we're talking with Nicola Darke on human potential in an AI world, using your innate capabilities to go further and faster.
Cool.
So it's an interesting one because we've always had webinars focused on the innovation sort of process side of things. So it's quite nice to do something on the people side. So a little bit about Innovation Academy. We're the experts in innovation learning solutions. So if you'd like a bit more information about that, drop onto our website. We've got a full range of solutions. Today we're joined by Nicola Darke. So Nicola, really pleasure to have you with us, transformation coach. And on the next slide, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what your company is all about.
Perfect. All right. Thanks. Hi, Grant. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me this afternoon. I love doing sessions with you guys. So yes, holistic transformation coach. I've spent kind of 10 years in the tech industry, really, through various different lenses, whether it's kind of strategy, leadership, governance for CIOs, or working in software, embedding innovation management tools into organizations, driving adoption, also setting up innovation programs in businesses. And really what I saw through doing that is the human element is so key to change. And I now work with people one-to-one on personal change. So looking at personal transformation, enabling them through their agency. And I use that to help businesses enable their human potential, working for more human centricity, taking a deeper view on human need, what it means to be human, to innovate and function at potential, because that's really how we become truly adaptable. Innovation or adaptability is a core facet of functioning at potential. And so that's really what these kind of three lines are on this page. These are my kind of three core principles that I work to. So Turbo Zen is the name of my company. Really, that's just a comment on duality. We have turbo, we have zen, we have light, we have dark, we have peaks, we have troughs, duality everywhere in life, but we've come to find ourselves in a position where we just prefer one half. We prefer only the peaks, we'd rather not have the troughs. But it's through seeing all sides that we're able to find holistic solutions. Even if we don't like them, they're a necessary half of the whole. So that's really
yeah, it's all about. Yeah, I really love that, and it's so apt at the time and in society when we're focused on AI, the potential of tech, and everything that it will do for society. And I think looking through the concepts you're going to share with us today, that there's a focus on the human potential that really needs looking at, and like you say, equal value, the other side of the coin in corporate innovation, we need to pay attention to. Yeah, so a real pleasure to have you with us today. Talk to us about human versus process innovation. Talk to us a little bit about that. Give us a bit of context about what today's all about.
Sure. Okay, so we're having this conversation because organizations are trying to be adaptable, right? Everybody's spending money on training people to learn how to innovate, to do innovation. But what they're really realizing is that maybe you've learnt the process of agile or design thinking, but that's not necessarily made you innovative or adaptable. And so there's a huge piece around mindset, attitude, and approach that still needs work and requires us to self-inspect. And then when we think about self-inspection, we're looking at where we're turning our attention, because we're very systems focused and it's kind of deemed as slightly fluffy to talk about being human. And my comment now on the slide about normal versus normalized is that, you know, we're the original, we created the system, but it's much more common, much more normal for us to talk about constructs, data points, have a clinical approach to things than it is to kind of understand what might be a little bit more nebulous with the human side of things. But that's a real mindset shift. And I mean, I always think food is really good parallel to kind of ram the point home. You go to the shop and you can buy regular food or you can buy organic food. Now, when you think about it, the difference between normal and normalized there is that organic food, normal food, it has no pesticide, it has been grown naturally, and the regular food has the pesticide, has, you know, chemical, but we kind of deem that as normal. So it's really switching our mentality around what kind of innate have.
Yeah, and I think everybody on this call, this webinar, could identify with that challenge of having learnt an innovation process, done a course, but still struggling with the human side of it, the actual implementation and culture change. So that really, really rings true.
And just the little image there with the kind of the hamster wheel in the head is just to also just highlight the fact that that has put us into a slightly unconscious way that we move through our day and move through our lives. We're very process driven. We have been really since the Industrial Revolution. We build systems. We're very focused on how we get through the system. We go to school, we go to university to get the job, to get the house, to get the promotion. And during the day, we get up, we take our kids to school, we commute, we work, we commute, we pick the kids up, we come home. And there's very little variance often in what we do, and we build up these layers around us, which doesn't spur us to think differently or to look at things in different ways. And sorry, yes,
Yeah.
moving on to the
No,
slide.
that's great.
And so learning a process like design thinking is a really good way to just also illustrate the point that, even though it puts human centered design at the center of what it does, that everything should be driven from human need, design thinking still comes down to a very fixed point at the end there of that last double diamond. We converge into a fixed point where it's done. We've got something new, we've innovated, great. Let's just all go back to BAU, please. Thank goodness that's over, type of thing. And we think in terms of getting from point A to point B. We think in terms of step change, and we focus on those fixed points rather than our ability to thrive in the middle and move between them. And it is in that messy middle where the magic happens, essentially. That's where we can turn our attention to our own capability rather than needing to attach to specific constructs on either side. And in terms of being in process of evolution and change, we are always in that process. Nothing does evolution, it just evolves. And I think to that point, one of my 3 principles is conscious creation. And what that hints at is that as humans, we have 2 fundamental capabilities. One, that we can evolve just with anything else in the natural world. And we can do that pretty quickly, but that's another story. And we're conscious. We have consciousness. We're aware. We're able to self-direct. And with that awareness, we can see how we're evolving. We can choose how we can evolve. We can self-direct. So we can consciously create our reality. And, by that rationale, evolution is really part of what it means to function at potential. It is part of our natural state. There's no concerted effort. It is an innate function of ours. So it's just about shifting out of this kind of process mindset.
Yes, I get what you're saying is balancing the potential of human beings versus the rigidity of perhaps a system, and finding a happy medium between the two, and then unlocking that human potential.
Exactly.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about what change means for the human body, the human brain, and how that might link to innovation.
Cool. So with this little habit loop that we've built up, we do that because it makes us feel safe and comfortable. And predictable, because we're negativity bias driven. We like to prevent bad things from happening. It's a very sensible approach. But that safety and predictability also makes us very easily disrupted. So when new things come along, when different arousal or stimulus points come along, whether it's an email or a tiger, unfortunately your body can't actually tell the difference, that basically your body starts to question, am I safe in this new situation? What is this? And so it then determines whether you're going to move into a stress state or not. And what stress does is it basically inhibits your ability to act and your function. So when we're stressed, our prefrontal cortex, which is our logical decision-making process part of our brain, essentially shuts down. So the ability to think differently is just not available to you. So when something new comes up, whether it's a new job, whether it's a decision on a new project, whatever it is, if you're stressed about this because you're not comfortable in that place, you're literally not going to have all your faculties available to you to make good, clear decisions. And furthermore, to ram that home, your hippocampus and your amygdala there are part of your limbic system, which is your mammalian brain, which is formed as we grow up. And what that does is it stores our reaction to stress states that we've encountered as children, our emotional responses. And when we're stressed, that's what the brain references. So not only do you not have your kind of logical decision-making abilities, but you're also referencing past behaviors from childhood to determine how you're going to act in this situation. So it's a difference between react versus respond, really. And obviously that's not the innovative mindset that we want to be in. So, you know, you can learn all the process you like, but the brain will do its own thing.
That's really interesting, because I think we can all identify with a process where we've come back to the business. We know we need to innovate. We know we need to change, and people might fight against that innovation and change, even though we know it's good for us. So you're saying that's like a primal brain reaction, right?
Yeah, very often just, a reaction. When change comes, we want to be able to make good decisions about it. So I definitely spend time working with people to help them override their stress states. And it's been a very good practice for me over the last few years as well.
Yeah, so that definitely rings true. Over and above having an innovation process, unless we unlock this human sort of pattern and stress response, it's very likely that we might block ourselves in that innovation journey.
Totally. I mean, you know, it's so easy. We're not even aware, because a lot of the time, logically, the brain will tell us, oh, but this is fine. You shouldn't be stressed here. But the body is regardless, you know. So even when you're in a situation which seems fairly innocuous, your body can still be reacting under a stress state. So there's a whole raft of things that you can do to kind of get better at spotting when that is happening.
And create an innovation sort of friendly environment for yourself and in your business.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. So you've got a really interesting YouTube video for us. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Okay, so I'll leave you guys to look at that another time. It's just to kind of illustrate the point here. So what we kind of sink further into our inability to think and act differently when we build for simplicity and convenience. So this is about, you know, the misnomer around human-centric design versus consumer-centric design. You know, we build for instant gratification, ease of use. We're used to kind of short sound bites. Our attention span is limited. And, you know, ease of use and instant gratification is good for consumers, making good consumers and a product adopted, which is, of course, what businesses want, but it's not necessarily good for helping humans to function at peak. Because when we build for convenience, we're removing those arousal points, we're removing those stimulus points, we're removing frustration, and frustration is essential for learning and for growth. If you look at a baby, the reason it gets up to walk and stand is through its frustration at not being able to engage with the world, right? So frustration is a really good driver for change and for growth. And when we start to eliminate that, we can stifle ourselves. And, you know, I was at a conference a couple of months ago in San Francisco listening to Google Empathy Labs talk about how they build AI in its relation to human interaction. And I mean, there are a number of comments that definitely raised some eyebrows. But one that sat with me was that AI should be built to never make you feel uncomfortable. Now, I appreciate that is driven through wanting to make a product adopted, for it to seamlessly integrate into your life. But we are training people not to think, not to question, when we need them to be robust and to learn and to adapt. And, you know, you think of all these devices that are, you know, household items that we're kind of training people to just trust and to take. Well, all these consumers are also your workforce, right? So you're instilling those behaviors in your workforce when we need people to be okay with conflict, to question. You know, uncomfortable conversations are where we get creative and coming up with new ways. And then also just a final point on this, in the healthcare world, there is now the phrase going around called digital dementia, where we're seeing cognitive capacity much reduced to where it should be, because people are so reliant on searching things online, storing things on their phone. We're just not using our brain in the same way. And so we kind of need to jar people out of their comfort zone a little bit. And
so sorry, Karen.
I was just going to say, and you know, it's an interesting one for, you know, those who are in kind of AI teams, automation teams. When you're looking at your digital ethics code, you know, what are you looking at here? Consumer need or human need? And I think it's really the difference between enable versus exploit, you know, if I can put that lens on it.
and the lesson I'm getting out of this for corporate innovation is helping our teams to become comfortable with frustration, challenge, hardship, and actually to sort of fall in love with that challenge, because that's going to unlock the human potential of the innovation process, right?
Exactly. So, we should be putting our attention to where the frustration is. We've got to be okay with disagreement.
Okay, that's really valuable, and it sort of links to this next slide about self-direction and the need people have as they innovate and apply these processes in the business.
Yeah, so super quickly, we're out of the habit of self-inspecting because we live in this habit loop and we're in a very convenient lifestyle. So we don't self-direct enough, and self-direction is essential for mobility, to have a malleable workforce, to be able to innovate, to be productive. And we need to turn our attention to ourselves so that we become more aware. Awareness and understanding enables control. Then you have control over your action in order to change. And this is very simply just an illustration of Michael Marmot's study on stressed civil servants. Basically, the outcome was the lower down the hierarchy you are, or the less control you have over your work and your life, the more likely you are to die of a stress-induced heart attack. So we just see self-direction and self-awareness as really a fundamental basic need for well-being and to function at potential.
So really, it's a basic business critical need for innovation and well-being in general in a workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, you've had some thoughts on how we could adapt the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Tell us a little bit about this diagram and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, sure. So what do we need, right? If we look at agency as a human need, we can see all these other needs that Maslow has given us, and these are all useful tools, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this. But the thing is that Maslow only looks at need in relation to the hierarchy, to the system, to the structure. And when we look at the top here to achieve actualization, we see this as having played and won the game or the system. We feel like we have to climb the ladder rather than just functioning at peak as a human and having fulfillment. The point of where we put our attention, we get stuck at the bottom rung because we think we have to build that layer before we can progress further up the triangle. We're very focused on, we must have a job, we must have the money, we must have the house, and we can see that in your workforce, it's full of people trying to meet what you would call in this system, but their basic needs due to perpetual kind of stress states and systems thinking. You can see people trapped in survival mode. Certainly something like a clock in, clock out mentality is a really good display of that, where people are very focused on safety. They're not thinking of fulfillment, they just want to meet the basics. Or you can look at your leadership a little bit, maybe higher up the triangle, where we see esteem. The converse of that is getting kind of trapped in power and needing dominance. And you might see that your leadership make decisions based on, short-term view and hitting their own immediate needs rather than seeing a bigger picture, because there can be a fear of falling out of that system. Got to keep my position, got to keep the job. And when we work like this, when we're very systems focused, we're not going to change the system if we keep putting it on a pedestal. We need to kind of reprioritize. And what that does is it's essentially a fundamental misunderstanding of our identity, where we struggle to understand ourselves unless we place ourselves within a system. We define ourselves by what we do. And you can also look at this from a customer perspective. So what needs are our services and our products meeting for our customers? Now, design thinking and jobs to be done looks at human need. However, I would question really the definition of how need is used there, because you will often find that it encourages to look at an experience or a task that someone needs to complete. Whereas you can go a lot deeper and look across many aspects in terms of really what is a human desire and a human need to feel fulfilled, to feel all of themselves, to function at potential as a human should, regardless of system. And if you want loyal customers, if you smash all of these and you really appeal to their inner need, then you're going to be doing great stuff.
So what I get out of that is you can have the best innovation systems, but unless you focus on the self-actualization of people, it's going to be really tough to unlock that potential. Now, you've built your own take on Human Needs Reimagined. Tell us a little bit about this model.
So yeah, I mean, I'm just switching it up a little bit so that it's non-linear again, to the point of systems and hierarchy and structure. Really, what are we talking about with human need here? What's the point? Well, to thrive and to function at potential, and essentially they're all interdependent. It is not one building block laid on top of another. And, you know, to use myself as an example, I left the city, I left a PAYE job, which you might look at in terms of physiological and basic safety that would traditionally be on the bottom rung. And instead of just desperately focusing on, you know, how I'm meeting those needs, I took time to pause and focus on self-actualization and how can I be the best version of me? How can I be authentic in what I'm producing? How can I connect to other human need? How can I find belonging in other people who are seeking to do what I do? And from there, that's when actually all the other elements have built out. So I just think we, again, can come to this from many angles and know that there is no kind of right or wrong approach, but ultimately we're more focused on goal of being fulfilled as a human and being able to function at that potential.
Yeah, so that's really useful in terms of a model to help as humans develop balance and develop sort of calm in the face of uncertainty, and innovation means uncertainty. Is there a way we could apply this sort of theory to corporate structure?
Oh, yes, there is, Grant. So,
funny you ask, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, we just need to flip the system, right? So when I'm talking about we're too system focused and we need to be focused on human, I'm not saying down with the system by any stretch. We like systems, just can be different to how it is right now. And we created it, so, you know, we can change it. And I suggest that we just flip it a little bit. So instead of seeking security in the parameters, in the point A and the point B, in the constructs, in the system, we find stability and security in self and what it means to be human, in our own purpose, as that enables us to handle external uncertainty and complexity of the changing world, of you know, a developing future, when we're more stable in self. And, you know, that then looks at having a shift from top-down power to more ecosystem structures, because again, if we want agency, and ecosystems with cross-functional teams or even self-managing teams, project workforces, we need to enable agency. We need every cell kind of playing its part, right? And top-down control usually comes from a lack of trust. We seek to control situations when we don't trust it's going to pan out the way that we want it to. And so we need to instill the ability at the individual level first, so that there is trust across the business. And that when we create new structures, that it can function well, that people are capable of functioning within new systems in new ways, and that leadership obviously trust that is going to happen. And, you know, ecosystems and sharing economies really do depend upon each cell playing their part, and that's really where we need to get to. And you can also just imagine that little cell, not just as an individual, but as the company, where you can look at the central focus as kind of the business's central linchpin on purpose, which I'll talk about shortly, and, you know, maybe a couple of key leadership team in the center. Then you might have the belt around the middle might be your automation layer, getting on with everything that it needs to do in the business. And then on top of that, you then have more project-based workforces for your human workforce, essentially, where there is malleability and mobility, and that you can dial the workforce up and down. And we're not so focused on structure, we're more focused on outcome of what we're trying to achieve in relation to the business's core kind of purpose and value.
So it's a new corporate structure that will be comfortable with scaling up, scaling down, spinning in, spinning out. Yeah, I really like that sort of cellular image rather than a linear corporate structure.
Yeah, and you know, there's balance to that too. You know, people want mobility, but they also want safety at the same time. You know, to meeting those needs again, right? To not be climbing up the ladder. They want everything at once, and we need to learn how to balance that. Right now, we live in a world of or, and we need to shift to and. You know, you think you can either have mobility or you can have safety. Actually, you can have mobility and safety, and you know, that's a kind of a key thing mindset wise, shifting from or to and. So yes, so if we're not finding solidity and safety in the system, where does it come from? Well, it comes from purpose and values at the individual level or the organizational level. And again, to where we're putting our attention and our attachment, the very things that we want to innovate, usually, like our business model, like our product or service, are the things that we spend our time focusing on, are the things that we become very fixed and attached to. So we need to create a new linchpin, something else that we fix and attach to, and that is purpose. If we want to change our culture, we need to set it with the right purpose, because purpose then determines what you value. What you value determines how you behave, and how you behave is really the physical playing out of your culture in a business. So there's a very clear kind of cause and effect there. And purpose also should be shaped by human need. That is how we stay focused on delivering for customers, and how you give yourself broader free rein to come up with whatever new way is needed. So instead of thinking about what new product we can create, we're thinking more deeply around what human need we're trying to serve, and all of a sudden that opens you up much more broadly to think about how you're innovating, where you're innovating, and you
create a purpose for your business. Yeah.
Does that make sense? And it shows you as a more conscious organization. Customers buy in to your connection to them through understanding their needs. Also, customers buy into your culture, right? And if that's driven from human need, you are just reinforcing that ability to connect on a much more deep.
And also, which will be greater success.
Yeah, and also, for your workforce, they will be more connected and more engaged in the business, and actually, getting more fulfillment out of what they do, feeling that there is purpose to what they're working towards, rather than just going through the motion, completing the process, completing the tasks.
And with that in mind, talk to us very quickly about the beginner's mind and how that might be a tool for our webinar listeners today.
Sure. So super quick. This is really about exploring mindset hurdles, because our conditioning can affect our ability to think differently and to innovate. And of course, every business decision is made by a fallible human with their own set of fears and beliefs and biases. And to the previous slide, beliefs are much further kind of down the rung in terms of what can be universal versus what varies between people. And we often find that kind of beliefs divide, and whereas values unite. And so how do we address beliefs? Well, beliefs are usually things that we picked up from our parents, from school, from work. We've kind of assumed them as our own. And that's really the thing about beliefs, is that they tend to be assumptions rather than objective understanding or fact. And design thinking teaches us, well, many things teach us not to assume in life. So this slide is really about just understanding how we get to more objectivity. And beginner's mind is a great tool to do that, and to again allow you to self-inspect your own approach to situations. And the saying is there on the phrase, it's a Zen Buddhist phrase, that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the experts there are few. Very often we come to the table thinking that we know what we need, what we can and can't do. We're making assumptions. And so beginner's mind is just a great tool to be more questioning, to just begin again each time we are thinking about innovating, doing something new, approaching any task, to be quite honest.
Yeah, amazing. And if we had to sort of bring it all together,
yes,
how do we reconcile process and people together?
So design thinking, then looking at divergent convergent thinking, what we're putting our attention to, where we find fixed points, where we become more open in terms of where we're divergent we open, and where we're convergent and we close down. I've just kind of reworked this a little bit, which I take my clients through. So if you just click through to the next one. Basically, I've reimagined it. Instead of a double diamond, we have a double triangle. And the idea is to illustrate that we're switching where we fix our attention and what we're attached to. So read divergent and convergent thinking, you can see that we're very fixed on self, on purpose, defined by purpose and connection, awareness and understanding, and then we're open and fluid at either end, rather than starting and finishing with a very fixed and closed point. And just to kind of very quickly talk through how I structure this, I call this my space framework. So you have space, awareness, connection, and embodiment. And so a lot of the time when we're innovating, we start with understanding what the problem and the need is, but actually there's a step before that in terms of understanding your capacity and really being able to see before you innovate, taking a wider view. You know, when we're in this habit loop, we're very busy as businesses, our heads are full, our phones are full, we have very tightly packed lives. And when things are full, there's no room to maneuver. We need a bit of space, we need a bit of wriggle room. And so this is really about taking a step back. And I liken it to a supersonic plane. You can go faster for the same energy at a higher altitude. So we take perspective in order to inspect, and capacity in order to act and move differently comes from knowing your mental, your physical, your economic, your societal, your competitive environment right the way throughout the spectrum. So space is about looking at all of your factors, how you can move as a business, how you can move as an individual. Then awareness is really about, once you take that perspective, you can be more objective with your own drivers and behaviors so that you can think and act differently. It's also about having clarity in awareness, clarity of purpose that we've just talked about. And also, I guess, from an organizational perspective, beyond purpose, also making data and awareness and knowledge accessible across your workforce so that there is that clarity that people can see clearly across the business. Connection, once we have that vision and clarity, we can then take ownership of something more meaningfully. We can be more connected to ourselves through understanding, more connected to ourselves enough to have the discipline to move forward, the ability to connect with each other, to collaborate. Also, this is about governance and how we align over what we are creating against our purpose. And our commitment and our connection to our purpose to do what's needed. You know, essentially there's a bit of heart in this really, in terms of commitment and connection. And then finally, embodiment. And I use this phrase because very often we learn something new, we think we understand it, cognitively we get it, but we've not really learned until we've made a proper shift. And so this is the difference between doing versus being, and I know versus I am. You know, and very much about breaking old habit, creating new habit, being well enough and understanding how you function to clearly carry out what is needed. And then also from an organizational perspective, this is where we start to bring in strategy, how we make it real. Very often businesses start with strategy, but really that only comes in once that we are clear on our purpose and how we can move as an organization, because strategy is merely a way to execute an action. And of course, lastly, when we embody something, when we create something new, a new product, it goes out into the world. We shouldn't think of it as a fixed point to attach to now, like we do with design thinking, but instead we're opening out again. We're letting it go. We're pushing it out into the world, knowing that it can change. It's up for grabs at any point. So essentially, we've focused and fixed in the center. We see the rest is fluid. And then essentially, again, overall, it's a commentary on not necessarily thinking to reskill for specific tasks in the face of, you know, all the job changes that are predicted due to AI and automation, but actually reskilling to be inherently adaptable and really understanding how you function, attention shifting from the system and turns to the self so that we are able to better mobilize.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nicola. That's an amazing sort of toolkit you've given us on how to unlock human potential and link that to the value of innovation, tech, AI, and all these sort of transformative technologies. So we appreciate that. Yeah, I think. Yeah, sorry, Karen.
I was going to say it's been great to talk it through, but are we a little tight on time? Are there questions, or do we have to wrap up?
I think what we might do is wrap up, and I'll give everybody your details if they wanted to put some questions together. I do have one question coming through from the audience, which is from Abigail, and she's saying her organization is quite a large corporate, sort of 3,000 employees. How might you work on sort of human potential, the human side of things in such a large organization that's very structural and very hierarchical?
I mean, there are obviously some of the mechanisms that I talked through, and I think I'll pick one of those, but I'll also say something else. I think traditionally when we're rolling out change in business, it's a conversation at the leadership team or whatever department heads, and we're discussing how we're going to kind of do the change to the rest of the workforce. And actually, because we're talking about everybody understanding how they function in order to move better, really the first step is actually having this kind of conversation much more widely across the business, and really starting to create that space and that awareness across the organization that everybody's kind of starting to kind of dawn on them and understand how they are actually able to move differently, and that they can kind of take charge of themselves and of change and lead it. But then also, typically it's quite normal to, when you're creating change in a business, to just pick either a department or a layer of people, or even ask people to come forward who are interested. And you can kind of start out by creating a cross-functional team around a particular project, and taking them through some specific training around spotting their mindset when they come to a new project, or understanding their stress state, or whatever it is that we've talked about today, but also many things beyond that. And then once you kind of have a layer of people who have gone through it, they will be your kind of champions, your proof in the pudding that the rest of the business kind of gets to see and to hear from. And then that's just a kind of a classic way to start rolling out from there, to be honest.
Yeah, amazing. And then this question sort of links, it's from Marius. So Marius, thanks for this one. Marius was saying, should the drive for change come from the top hierarchy or from the bottom? Is there a way to sort of start from where you are?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it has to come from both, because leadership do have to walk the walk, and they need to essentially carve a channel for change to really happen. Because ultimately they're the ones who are going to determine how much you can shift your governance, or sign off on purpose, that kind of thing. So they do have to be really committed to this. But then it is very much about mobilizing the wider workforce, because I mean, as I said, you can put whatever process or structure in place, or say this is what we're going to do as a business, but if you're not giving your people the capability to really move within that, then again, that's where we see things fall down in businesses, because we're not enabling the behavioral shift.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really, really practical, useful advice. So if you want to meet Nicola in person, Nicola, you're doing a keynote speech at our Innovation Mini MBA as part of London Tech Week.
Yes, I am.
So very excited about that. So guys, if you'd like to meet Nicola, talk a little bit more, we'll be in London 10 to 14 June. You can get a little bit more detail off our website. And very finally, here's Nicola's contact details, and also the contact details for Innovation Academy. So if you've got any other questions we weren't able to answer today, or you'd like to talk through something in more detail, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Please feel free to ping me a note. I've got a couple of resources on my website around habit building or rolling out innovation programs. But if you have any questions, give me a shout.
Amazing. And at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a handout from today's session shared. And then, Nicola, thanks so much for those tools. There's a lovely bunch of things there we can take and use immediately. I know I've really benefited already from some of those. Amazing stuff.
I hope so. I mean, I could talk for an hour on stress. I could talk for an hour on belief. I could, I've literally gone through it in lightning speed. So I hope it is useful and it's not too intense and quick.
No, amazing and practical. Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks to everyone for joining us. It was a pleasure working with you today, and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nicola. Bye.
Bye-bye.